Greetings and salutations. Welcome to Autist Circle, episode 16, H.R. Geiger. I am, as always, your captive host, the Bleach Demon, joined, as always, by my inevitable, yes, we'll go with that one, co-host, Total Blackout, Total Blackout Fat Dave. Yeah, there we go. And,
And me,
and
the
a special
prudentialist.
guest. Yes,
Yeah.
3 of 12. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thought this would be like the perfect episode to invite our favorite member of the board collective on. So, yeah, today we're talking about H.R. Geiger. In case you couldn't tell from the background, the Swiss artist that revolutionized sci-fi and just did so many crazy things for for modern culture in real life and everything. He was just a really amazing and exceptional guy. So much so, in fact, that I barely scratched the surface of his biography. I'm going to leave out a whole bunch of shit. So this autist circle is not necessarily as autistic as I like it to be, but yeah. So I guess first and foremost, we'll jump into our traditional art history timeline here with H.R. Geiger. We can see he's born shortly after World War II, or right before World War II ends, because he was born in 1940. And he survives through the entire run of surrealism, or the popular run of surrealism, and really kind of helps bring in fantastic realism, and of course is like the progenitor of biomechanical art. So I'll read my blurb here and we'll get into the biography. So Geiger, he stands at the meeting points of symbolism, surrealism, fantastic realism, and industrial design, along with science fiction, horror, and cinematic world building. And his work is the embodiment of the transition to modern technological age, as emblematic of the desire to combine man and machine. After humanity fully embraced industrialization and the technological age brought about a new idea of man becoming inseparable from machine, as industry was inseparable from modern society. And his work pushes past the old divide between fine art and popular design. He made paintings, prints, sculptures, furniture, album covers, film creatures, and immersive environments, all from the same visual universe that spoke deeply to man's desire to fuse humanity with machinery. His work gave modern machine age a body and a world to draw from, sometimes sadistic and sometimes dystopian and sometimes utopian, but oftentimes very sexy. He made horror elegant, turned the female form into a repulsive yet seductive form, cutting yet soft and sleek yet brutal. And his work doesn't really fit into any category. He's one of those rare artists whose work really creates its own category and whose style has embedded itself into our culture in a way that makes it inseparable from our modern understanding of sci-fi. Much in the way that Mucha's art, his Art Nouveau style, became entwined with advertising in the early 20th century. And his impact really cannot be understated, and his ability and genius definitely can't be denied. And his place in the art timeline, it places him in a category of his own as one of the most pioneering and influential artists of the 20th century. So with that blather along, we'll jump into the biography here. Or no, this is actually why and this is why I picked him. This is why he matters in the grand scheme of the art history timeline, and why I selected him. It's because he did something very few modern artists do, and that he created a visual language so distinct that it became shorthand for an entire kind of fear. Geiger-esque does not mean dark or grotesque. It means flesh fused with machinery, sexuality infused with death, and architecture infused with anatomy and the human body absorbed into an industrial nightmare. He gave the modern machine age a body. earlier artists had painted nightmares and demons, and hellscapes, and artists like Bosch, who this is the Garden of Earthly Delights, which we've talked about previously. As a, this is literally a hellscape. And then William Blake. Oh, go ahead.
Now I have to ask: did Geiger include butt music anywhere in his art?
I'm sure there's definitely some insertions. I don't know if there's necessarily horns. Then also William Blake, who did this painting. This is the Red Dragon with the closed woman in the sun. Fuseli, and this is Henry Fuseli of the Nightmare from 1781. And then Arnold Bachlin. This is Die Pest. As soon as it loads here, there we go. This is a really big image. This is from 1898. And then Gustave Moreau, who we've talked about, and this is Phaethon, which we didn't, or Phaeton, which we didn't actually talk about during the presentation, but this is one of his images of monstrous beings. And this is from 1878. So Geiger's monsters they're not medieval devils or classical spirits. They're modern machine infused with nightmares that play on the fears of technology gone awry, and of xenophobia of what the truly alien thing is. And the grotesque was always part of art history, and you can trace that through medieval marginalia, the shit that the priests used to draw in the margins of the books.
Yes, the murderous rabbits, among others,
and the butt horns. That was that was another thing. And then, of course, Bosch, who did a lot of horror. Peter Bruegel the Elder was also very similar, did some kind of horrific stuff. Mannerism always had weird, grotesque things in it. Of course, the Baroque and a lot of the martyrdom that was portrayed in the Baroque imagery. And then the Romantic image, or the Romantic period, had a lot of nightmare imagery, which we'll talk about. We'll actually talk a lot about that next season. And then symbolist death paintings, which of course we talked about Moreau and his symbolist work, and we saw quite a bit of death and grotesquerie in there. Also, surrealism was very popular with that, but Geiger really updates the grotesque world for mass production. Weapons technology, surgery, psychology, space travel, and a heavy dose of sexual anxiety. And Geiger matters because he did not merely paint monsters. He built a modern mythology for the machine age, one where the body and the factory, the cathedral and nightmare all combine together to become the same thing. So with that, we'll jump over to his personal life. So HR stands for Hans Rudi. Hans Rudi Geiger was born in Chur in Switzerland in 1940 to Melly Geiger Meyer, says his mom, and Hans Richard Geiger, who was a pharmacist. And from an early age, he had a fascination with skulls and mummies and other things.
I can't imagine why.
Right. Well, and from this, he had oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a quip. Son, I said pharmacist, not pharmacist.
Well, they lived in an apartment above the pharmacy, and he had an older sister.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and of course that's like the setting that he grew up in, was above the pharmacy, so that he was always involved in like anatomy and medicine. He grew up running around the halls of the pharmacy, where there's all this medical stuff, cabinets, bottles, corridors, and it was like a pretty clinical setting, and he lived in an apartment above that.
I have to wonder if because some pharmacies at the time would have specimens in jars and whatnot, and
Certainly
that
lots of unpleasant
influenced
conversations.
well the unpleasant
Right.
conversations, but the visuals
Yeah.
of these distorted, like say a cat, in a jar that's been preserved, things like that. You kind of see through lines with some of that in the art too.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, once you hear that, it's like, oh, he grew up above a pharmacy where there's all this weird medical shit, and like likely specimens in jars and stuff like that. Definitely people dealing with illness and sick people. Like, oh, it kind of makes a bit more sense. But his early imagination was fed by dreams and nightmares, and he really absorbed literature from or images from other artists and literature. One of the popular artists he liked were, of course, Bosch. He was a big fan of Dali, and also Alfred Cuban, who did this painting in 1903. Or it's not a painting; it's a drawing, and this is called Angst. And you can definitely see like from the body shape where he would get, inspiration from that. He was also a big fan of authors like Gustav Meyrink, this young gentleman here who wrote a lot of horror novels, and of course our boy Howard Philip Lovecraft. He
His
was
world
very
famous cat.
right. Yeah, I was gonna say it. His world famous cat. So his childhood was really kind of immersed in horror and horror literature and horror art. And grotesque art and stuff like that. And so his father really viewed being an artist as a breadless profession and encouraged him to become a pharmacist to follow in his footsteps. But Geiger could not. He was not.
Son, I swear to God, if you don't stop farming those cysts.
And he was an exceptionally talented person. He was actually a gifted musician, and this is him playing the alto saxophone.
Oh,
He was
wow.
an inventor. Yeah. He played saxophone and piano, and he played in jazz bands at the time. But he ultimately concentrated his artistic creation on artistic creation. And he did, like I said, he played jazz, which really allowed him to, much in the way that he experimented with new techniques in art, jazz did that same, gave him that same avenue where he could experiment with new stuff. Because jazz is jazz, and sometimes it gets a little off the rails.
Don't get me started on Stan Kenton. We could go for an hour of me ranting about the man. The pervert.
So, my cat steps on my video cable here. Okay, so in 1962, this is young Geiger. He moved to Zurich, where he studied industrial design at the University of Applied Arts, which is the Kunstgewerbeschule. And there he began to develop his kind of unique stylistic approach that people would later be described as biomechanics. In the mid-60s, he was already producing visual works in his iconic style. In 1964, while still attending school, he made ink drawings that were ultimately published in a school newspaper and in magazines. One called The Atom Kinder, which is the child of the atom, which was a reflection of his traumatic fear of nuclear war. Which was really present at that time in that like early post-World War II era, because we just dropped the sun on Japan twice, and nobody else wanted that to happen to them. And even when I was a fucking kid in the 80s, they really drove that fear of nuclear war into us. And I think it was probably even more prescient for these people because it was within living memory for them. Right? Like they saw the actual horrors of what had happened to the Japanese people when they got a bomb dropped on them.
So, I don't know about the link that you provided, but it is an interesting dichotomy between the Atomkinder and the World War One propaganda art of Austria-Hungary
Yeah.
being a
Yeah.
half-dead empire. That's
Right.
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I thought this was a kind
The-
of a cool picture to put together with those two. But that's they compared the two and the grotesqueries of the horror.
Dear God. There really is a resemblance there,
Yeah.
if not just in the busyness of the image.
Yeah. So
Though,
by oh, go ahead.
yeah. Though I can. The emphasis on the biomechanical stuff though is still quite separate. Though.
Yeah.
I'm not contributing very much here.
Well, and you can see the Dolly influence on this work, with the bizarre kind of flat landscape. That was kind of symbolic, or it was kind of typical of Dolly's work, was to have big open landscapes and stuff.
Yeah.
So in 1965, or by 1965, his works were appearing in underground magazines and in a privately printed series of works under the title Ein Fressen für den Psychiater, which was a feast for the psychiatrists, which was probably an apt description for the work, because it was really kind of twisted work. And because I bought a couple of books in preparation for this episode, and one of them, in one of the books, the Taschen biography, Geiger himself is quoted as saying, I knew that I had a deep attraction to the opposite sex at a very young age, which will become very apparent through most of his works. And it forced me to really kind of curate a lot of the images I show on screen so that they are YouTube friendly.
Yes, yeah. We talked about this last week. It's like, oh yeah, now we can only show like maybe an eighth of what he ever produced.
Yeah, lots of vaginas, lots of wieners, lots of stuff, and so.
Meanwhile, YouTube, yeah, show me those fat xenomorph asses.
So, but in 1966, he met Li Tobler, this lady here. She was a Swiss actress, and she became his first muse and his first great love of his life. And this picture is she did an exhibition of shoe art. And at this exhibition, Geiger actually wore 2 loaves of bread as shoes, which were kind of weird. But yeah, so he encouraged her to do this exhibition on shoes. And this was much later. This was after they'd been together, this picture here. So, but they met in 1966. So before we jump into more about her, we'll go ahead and look at our first work here, which this is called Birth Machine. And it's one of the most iconic Geiger images. The bullet babies, as they're called, there's a large one cast in bronze that sits outside of the Geiger Museum. There is an actual bronze recreation of this whole image in the Geiger Museum, and all over. It's a really heavily reproduced image, and I think one that's especially relevant to some of the things we're facing today. So we'll get into the technical details of this shit, and then we'll talk about it. So it was created again in 1967. It's India ink on wood and paper, and the original image measures 43.3 by 67 inches, or 110 by 170 centimeters. And currently it's located at the Giger Museum at the Castle Saint-Germain in Gier, Switzerland, which is the Geiger Museum. The Aluminum Sculpture Museum, like I said, is also there. And it's early Geiger, but it shows the mature style, and it created this bullet baby, like I said, which is it's an iconic image that's persisted across several of his works. And his background in industrial design really jumps out in this one because the image itself looks like a cross section of a gun, right? And it looks like a mechanical diagram. Um, and like I said, this image is especially relevant now when we're kind of being when childbirth is being used as a weapon against the native peoples in the countries, where we're actively being conquered as a result of births. So, and this really does shows the organic process of birth as machinery and the child as a weapon and the womb as a chamber for that weapon. And it really highlights how children can be used as a weapon of conquest. So in this image, he collapses the womb and the factory and the firearm into one object. And birth is no longer a sacred beginning. It's simply a mechanism. Life is manufactured, chambered, and fired into a brutal world. It doesn't show death as the end of life. It shows violence, or it does not show that death is the end of life. It shows that violence is already present from at the beginning of life. The child is not later corrupted later by civilization. The child is born into the barrel. In one image, Geiger turns reproduction and overpopulation, warfare, and industrial design into a single nightmare system.
And speaking of a nightmare system, mechanically, this gun is driving me up the wall. And it's like, pieces don't align the way they should. There's my tism for the day.
And as we'll get into later, I'll talk about Scorn and how it takes this specific concept and really plays it up.
Yeah. That and again, it's like I said, this is birth as a weapon. It couldn't be a more relevant topic than what we're facing, especially in the light of recent decisions that have been made by our Supreme Court. Birth is easily weaponized against the native people. So we'll move on here. This is Geiger and Li Tobler. Of course, we see on the left is the Adam Kinder image, and then on the right is an image called Under the Earth. So in 1967, the same year that he created Birth Machine, Geiger and Tobler, they moved into an attic of a condemned building. And again, that same year he created the Astro Unix, which is this piece, which is very it's modeled very heavily after a Dali piece, which I didn't bother including here, but it's Geiger's interpretation of a Dali image. And then the other one, Under the Earth, like I said, the other one. So it just shows kind of somebody like a machine human incubating in a womb under the earth. He also met writers Sergius Golowin and a filmmaker F.M. Muir, which furthered his connection to the wider world of art and to the world of filmmaking. And in 1968, he was persuaded by a friend from Chur to pursue art as a full-time career, because he was still working as a full-time designer, which is what he was schooled as. And he changed the focus of his work from what customers wanted to what he wanted. And then in 1969, his first posters were printed and distributed internationally by H.H. Kuntz, who was a collector and a co-owner of Switzerland's first poster publishing house. And that really marks the beginning of his international exposure. And in 1970, in the wake of all his success, he purchased a small house in Oerlikon in Zurich, which he and Lee moved into in April of that year.
What, and give up the squalor?
I know. Give up the condemned house. And in 1972, and this was really pivotal, in 1972, during a visit to London, he meets up with Hugo Schumacher, who is this Santa Claus-looking gentleman here. And that guy, this is the first guy who introduced him to the airbrush. And we can see this is one of his airbrushed works in the background. And that would become one of the primary tools that gave Geiger his signature, his art, its signature, like polished look. That metallic and almost surgical looking shine to his work was done with an airbrush. And in 1973, he was commissioned to do a cover of Emerson, Lake and Palmer's Brain Salad Surgery album. And this gave him entry into the culture of rock before actually entering the culture of Hollywood. And that will actually be our next piece that we're going to talk about. Next two pieces. So this is Brain Salad Surgery 1 and 2. And the first image, the skull image, is the outside of the album, and it opens up to reveal the face below. It was originally designed as a triptych, so a 3-panel painting. The original one, of course, was painted for an EP cover, so it's only 13 by 13 inches or 34 by 34 centimeters. And the original work for this is actually listed as missing or stolen by the Geiger estate, and it was stolen from Prague in 2005. So he was commissioned to design the record cover for the English progressive rock group, like I already said, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, which you can see the ELP on the front here. And like I said, it's a triptych. The skull imagery opens up or reveals the female beneath. And the female, if you look at it, it's very similar to a lot of his other females, which is believed to have been based off of Li Tobler. Like I said, she was a common theme in a lot of his works, and she was his first true muse. And this really represents his emergence into mainstream and his introduction into people's homes. He was no longer just creating bizarre images for galleries or illustrations for underground magazines. He was creating an image for distribution by fucking Atlantic Records, which was a huge record label at the time. And it was very different than a lot of the rock album stuff at the time. A lot of the album art, of course, it was more psychedelic. It was the color explosions of the 70s rock art. This is cold and architectural, and it really gives progressive rock a biomechanical face. It's intellectual and theatrical and dangerous, and it shows how easily Geiger's world could move from private nightmare to mass culture. And I personally am not like the biggest Emerson, Lake and Palmer fan. I can't say I dislike them, but I can't think of one of their albums off the top, or one of their songs off the top of my head. But I do know, as like a progressive avant-garde kind of rock band, they really did want to buck the trends of what the typical musical artists were going for at the time. And so they did seek out Geiger because of his dark aesthetic. So on the heels of that, we'll jump over to our next piece, which is Li 1. And this was created in 1974. It measures 27.5 by 39 inches or 70 by 100 centimeters. And the original image is supposedly at the H.R. Geiger Museum. And the medium on their site is listed as a photogravure, which is a printing method that uses etched copper plates. And it was developed in 1820 by photo pioneers with Star Wars names, and I didn't want to put them in here. Although the original image was acrylic on paper, because acrylic is the most common paint used in airbrushing. I mean, all the airbrush paints I have are acrylic, so, and it's just the easiest. It's easier to make acrylic paints into a fine enough medium for airbrushing. So, and like I said earlier, Geiger and Tobler met in '67, and she had been his muse for nearly a decade before he made this image. And it's it's not just a portrait of her, obviously, because that would be really fucking weird if it was just a portrait.
At least for
It's
him,
like
yeah.
yeah, right. It's like a shrine or a reliquary of her. Her face is serene, her eyes are glowing, and she's enclosed in a symmetrical network of tubes and skulls and horns and all sorts of the typical biomechanical Geiger horror. And she's transformed into something that's not fully human, and she's transported into Geiger's world, his imagination, how he imagined things. And originally, it's reported that Tobler, when she saw this originally, she tore it to pieces because she did not like it. She didn't see it as a tribute, as it was meant. She thought it made her look ugly. However, it was repaired, and this work, along with the other Li 2, this painting here, they have become some of his most iconic and recognizable works. Like, if you see these images, you automatically know, oh, that's H.R. Geiger. And they've also been mass-produced on, like, skateboards, fucking snowboards, not to mention posters and t-shirts and all sorts of stuff. These images make their way onto everything. So in this work, he's not meant to turn humans into monstrous horrors, but into a tribute of beauty suspended inside a machine-like shrine, which you can see. This is, and of course, there's lots of sexual imagery in here as well, with the tube and the opening on the people. Of course, covered in skulls with the tubes and the horns. It's obviously a Geiger painting, and it's one of, like, to say, it's one of the most iconic of his iconic image of his work. So in 1974, he was really on the cusp of one of the most difficult periods of his life, because his work was becoming more public and more ambitious. And this is the year the Passages catalog was published by Bunder Kunsthaus in Chur. But at home, his world was kind of breaking down around him. Li Tobler, his lover and muse, was sinking deeper into depression, and he tried to care for her, but in the end, he couldn't save her. And in 1975, she took her own life in the house they shared in Orlikon, which is really a great tragedy for him. And he was really distraught by it, but at the same time, he was also so busy that he didn't have a lot of time to dwell on it. And that same year, he was involved in Geiger's Necronomicon, and this is the poster for that, which was a short work made by J.J. Whitmer, covering his material from 1972 to 1975. And then in 1975, as many people know, he created the decor and designs for Alejandro Jodorowsky's planned adaptation of Dune, which was a massive project that was ultimately never produced. And in fact, the only thing that was produced about it was a documentary about the making of it and how it never was produced. But the Harkonnen material, and if you ever, I mean, I think the current iteration of Dune does a really good job of capturing the Harkonnen aesthetic. I feel like David Lynch's Dune did a really good job of capturing the Harkonnen aesthetic. And it's a tragedy that this movie didn't actually get made, because I think Salvador Dali was going to be the Emperor, which would have been hilarious. Wow. Yeah. It had a lot of really famous people attached to it, but it ultimately just never ended up being made. And the Harkonnen material really, it gave him a natural subject of a cruel, diseased, and aristocratic machine world, which really resonates throughout his art. And you know, even though the movie collapsed, it put him near the orbit of people and ideas that would later feed into the Alien franchise. And after Tobler's death, his work takes on a much darker tone, and he becomes more haunted by preservation, absence, death, and transformation. And that'll lead us to our next piece that we're going to talk about. This is Necronom 4, painted in 1976. Obviously, with the, it looks, you know, this is the inspiration for the Alien. Like, this painting is the inspiration for the Alien franchise. It was painted in 1976, and it's acrylic on paper and wood. The original measures 59 by 39 inches or 50 by 100 centimeters, and it's currently listed at the Geiger Museum. And of course, one of the most defining images of his career, and not just his career, but of late 20th century art. And it bridges the private his private biomechanical world into Alien. And the H.R. Geiger Museum notes that after the publication of an Necronomicon in 1977, a copy reached Dan O'Bannon, who showed it to Ridley Scott and 20th Century Fox, and Scott became convinced that Geiger was the right artist for the film, and he began working on Alien in 1978. Of course, the creature is shown in profile, upright and monumental, with an elongated skull, exposed rib cage, and tube-like appendages. And it's fleshed, and it looks fleshy and an engineered animal, kind of like the aliens, obviously. It's not really a monster in the old Gothic or fantasy sense, because it's designed like something bred and assembled or evolved inside of a technological nightmare.
Or shot out of a gun womb.
Yeah. Shot out of a gun womb. Yeah, exactly.
There's also something to be said about the worshipping of the beauty of the female body again, where the long head is in many cultures seem to be is like a genetic abnormality that forms in certain people. And although usually the brain capacity isn't anything special, in some cases it does give birth to super geniuses in that they have additional brain matter to store more memories, and could be it could be someone who could live to free 400 and still form new memories, but usually it doesn't really have any real effect on their lives.
Yeah.
So there's like a beauty aspect to it.
That really makes sense with how a lot of, like, especially Victorian era cultures had the really tall hair, and like they really kind of made the head seem a lot bigger than they were. And I think there are some African tribes that used to like put boards on people's heads to make their heads stretch out all weird and shit when they were
Some
Yes.
of the North American tribes did that as well.
Did they? Yeah.
The Flathead Indian tribes specifically.
Oh,
Where they
yeah.
flatten and shape the skull.
Yeah. I mean, which obviously didn't lead to super intelligence. So
No.
It's to be
No,
noted.
no. Definitely not.
So with that, we'll actually jump over to our last major work that we're going to talk about. And this is the passages, as we talked about. And this is called Passages Temple. And beginning in the 70s, like I said, he began working on a series called Passages. And this work was originally created in 1975 and was important enough to title the 1975 solo exhibition at the Bunder Kunsthaus in Schur, which was in his hometown region. And of course, the work shows an altar surrounded by alien-like figures with elongated forms, and everything in the image kind of pulls you towards that center altar, which has a very womb-like design to it, a very uterine design to it. And the series was really important because it shows that Geiger was not just creating images; he was creating kind of a cohesive world. And he had a series of images that had doors, corridors, entrances, and machinery, all intertwined into the same world, and temples, and they create a world that's alien to our own space, and the spaces themselves feel sacred or taboo because they show birth, with copious amounts of babies all around them. They show death, and they show transformation more than anything. So in this temple, his biomechanical vision really becomes architectural. We're no longer just looking at a body or a face or even a monster. We're looking at the space itself. He's turned it into a shrine or a corridor or a womb or even a tomb. And there's machine imagery fused into all of it. And it really gives a backdrop for the world behind the creation of the aliens. And it shows how he had already constructed the world of aliens before it was put into film. So, let's see.
Oh, I did a little bit of backtracking with the Dune adaptation.
Yeah.
They were trying to get Orson Welles as Baron Harkonnen.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right. I remember that. Yeah. So, yeah, like I said, they were trying to get a lot of people into that, and ultimately just fell through. Now, at that point in Welles' career, I don't know. He was definitely fat enough to play Baron Harkonnen.
Oh yeah. I mean,
he wouldn't have to
he
wear
also
that.
Made the Paul Cesson champagne commercials, which, if you have not watched those, look them up. They're the most amazing thing in the world.
I'm happy to look them up after this. So again, as I stated previously, Scott became convinced that Geiger was the right artist for Alien, and he began working on the film in '78. He was traveling between Shepperton Studios and Zurich, and his art did not imitate Alien. Alien really grew out of his art. Scott was struck by the Necronomicon, his collection of images in the Necronomicon. Not like Evil Dead, Ash and the Evil Dead Necronomicon. Just the... and the Necron 4, or Necrom 4, it really affected him so strongly that they ended up altering the original designs only very slightly for the film, just to adapt it for the film. So obviously we can see the similarities between the alien and the Necronom image. Notably, the human face is gone on it, replaced by that iconic alien double mouth, which was just awesome. Young Dave, when I first saw this movie in the 80s, I was born in '77, so I couldn't have watched it then, but I watched it in the mid 80s, and that shit was terrifying to me as a kid, because that's such a horrific thing. It's like, oh, it's got razor sharp teeth. Oh, and it's got a second set of fucking jaws. Like,
and I will say that they did horror right, because it wasn't just here it is to freak you out. No, it was that slow, tense buildup, and then you get shocked with its appearance.
Right.
It is brilliantly told,
Right.
And then to have all of these far from human elements, where it doesn't just look like a guy in a suit.
Right.
That was the brilliant part.
Yeah. And he did a really good job of creating something that was alien, but not so alien as to be not like Lovecraftian alien horror. More, again, psychological sci-fi horror. And his contribution to the film obviously was not just the monster, because he gave that movie its entire alien aesthetic. The creatures, the egg forms, the derelict ship, the fossilized pilots, and the space jockey atmosphere. the sense of organic machinery, and all of that carries Geiger's deeper idea that life and machine are not opposites. They fused into one terrifying system, and the threat, again, like you said, it's not some bug-eyed monster or robot. It's not even really a man in a rubber suit, because it's something that is biological, and skeletal, and it makes it alien all at once. And it definitely feels designed as a killing machine, but it's not something that humans would design. But Geiger's relationship with Hollywood was not necessarily always a smooth one, because he was an artist with exacting standards, and so he often struggled with producers and with the difficulty of seeing his designs realized properly, which is common among artists. They have something pictured in their head, they take it to a producer, and the producer wants to do something cheaper, which doesn't always work out. And Hollywood really struggled to contain an artist whose work was this obsessive and expensive. Of course, because it was so different and so many new sets and everything would have to be designed. And again, he was really uncompromising about it. But in 1980, he won an Academy Award for Best Visual Effects for Alien, with 4 other people. And he did not simply design a monster for Hollywood. He smuggled an entire private mythology into mass culture. So after the Alien franchise, I missed my image of the Geiger bar here. That's fine. Alien and his work on the film. Yeah, I just forgot to put it in. His work on the film made him known around the world. It was not just the design of the aliens, but it was the design of the world around it. And the Oscar didn't turn him into a conventional film industry designer. He remained himself. He was private and exacting and difficult to translate. And he was much more comfortable building complete visual worlds than making quick commercial monsters. Between 80 and 81, while traveling in between New York and Los Angeles, he was inspired to create his New York City series, which this is the first image of. And then this is another piece from that. And yet another image from it. And they are just reflections of the city as a biomechanical machine with his iconic style. And one of the coolest post-80s threads was the abandoned Dune work. He kept it alive after the film collapsed, because his Harkonnen furniture designs were developed at full scale, and in 1981 and later used in the Geiger bar in Shure and adapted for the museum and Museum Geiger bar in Gruyere. There was also one in Tokyo that opened in 1989 and or 88, I think it was. And he was involved in at least a half a dozen other film projects. 2 of the Alien films, he was not specifically consulted for Alien 2, but he was consulted for Alien 3 and for Prometheus. Both of the Species movies, he designed the creature in Species. Also, he worked on Poltergeist II, and he worked on a few other small indie films, some indie films and some larger films, some that didn't actually make it to fruition. So he also worked in sculpture, again, like with the bar. He had an abiding desire to extend the core elements of his artistic vision beyond beyond paper and into the 3D reality of his surroundings. He kind of wanted to live in that world and design that world around him. And like I said earlier, in 88, he designed that Geiger bar in Tokyo, Japan, which was a huge, all-encompassing it had all of his stuff in it, and that entire Geiger aesthetic. And now there's bunches of them all over the place. Let's see. Oh yeah, okay. So the second one, Ensure, was actually opened in 1992. I have that first part messed up. So anyhow, so we're coming up close to the end, and then we've got a trailer for a game that we're going to talk about because he was involved in games, and he was involved in everything, and his influence just can't be understated. So, a further extension of his dream, the Geiger Museum opened its doors in June of 1998 in the Chateau Saint-Germain, in the historic medieval walled city of Gruyères, Switzerland. And it's a permanent home of many of his most prominent works, and the museum actually houses the largest collection of Geiger's paintings and sculptures, and furniture and film designs, which date all the way back to the 60s. And in 1996, he actually launched his own website, hrgeiger.com, which is still live, and it very much looks like it was done in 1996. It has that kind of almost GeoCities look to it.
Yes, it does. Oh my.
Yeah. And within a month of it launching, it got 100,000 hits from all over the world. And then by the year 2000, the site had reached more than 1 million unique visitors. Because he was an artist that really changed with the times and embraced the modern world. And his biography could easily fill an episode of its own. And this has really only been a pass through the major landmarks of his life. The essential pattern is clear. Geiger was an artist who took fear seriously. He did not treat the nightmare as something to escape from. He studied it, organized it, polished it, and really gave it a firm structure. And across his work, the human body is never just flesh. It is a machine, a weapon, a shrine, a mask, a womb, or even a corpse, and also a piece of architecture. And that kind of body horror is what makes his art so unsettling. It doesn't show us monsters invading the human world. It shows us a world where humanity and machine have already fused and become monstrous on their own. And on May 12th, on 2014, at the age of 74, he died in the hospital due to injuries he sustained at a fall in his home. And he's currently buried within sight of the Geiger Museum, which I thought was kind of interesting. So with that, I'm going to jump over to this. So 3 pointed this out to me when we were talking earlier, and I'd never actually heard of this because...
Oh, the Scorn game? Yeah.
Yes, the Scorn game. So this is the Scorn teaser trailer from Ebb Software. And you can definitely see the Geiger elements in it.
It is very Geiger-esque, isn't it?
It's like ripped straight out of the Geiger.
Not just the imagery, but many of the themes of it are present there in excruciating detail.
Yeah.
In fact, if we have time, we should probably, if there's combat in this trailer, I'm not sure.
I think
because there are older trailers than this.
And this is from 10 years ago, but the game itself wasn't released until 2022.
Mm-hmm.
I love that image right there. The twitching monster inside of like the womb.
Yeah. The game is full of gameplay elements that usually involve taking babies or fetuses and treating them kind of like power cores.
Oof.
Oh, yeah.
They have to biologically control things like doors, mechs, weaponry, turrets, gondolas, elevators. Which is particularly disturbing, seeing as you have to. They often immediately rebel against you, and they're sort of flailing to understand their environment. And the only way to move forward is to destroy the mechs, remove them from the mechs, and then usually kill them on the spot. In fact, you had to install it in the mech in the first place.
It's very dark. Like, obvious, it's very Geiger-esque. And of course, scenes like this, you can definitely see the Geiger influence. Of course, like you couldn't before, but...
Yeah.
Well, when the first part of the trailer, it's very tight, just moving along thing. It's like, well, I can kind of see it. And then when you see a little more of the gameplay aspect, that's where it really comes out.
And the gun, you switch weapons by switching the attachment to the gun.
Oh, it's so gruesome, dude.
Yeah, it is definitely a uniquely inspired game, that is for sure.
It's also not very long. It's only about 8 hours.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you can finish it in an evening.
Huh.
But if you do, you probably miss a lot of the detail, and there are reasons to replay it.
Man. Yeah, that's from 2017. So here's this is the gameplay trailer. We'll look at this a bit.
And I've seen tech demos from, like, I don't know, like the late 2000s, I believe. Which, at the time, it was considered to be outrageously graphically, technically impressive when it was first unveiled.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can definitely see the age and elements of the trailer, but still, that is a lot to render.
And the fact that the character in these trailers does a lot of backtracking and looping around during combat, it kind of illustrates how it kind of feels like a disjointed dream. Nightmare is probably way more accurate.
Yeah.
Because the enemies can very easily kill you. It's often the smarter idea to just avoid them.
Jesus Christ.
Mm-hmm. And, I mean, when the first tech demos of this was coming out, people very much had Dead Space on their minds.
Yeah.
Mm.
The walls of flesh are reminiscent of the later stages in the Ishimura, when you see the deeper parts of the ship where the Necromorph first started spreading the flesh through the ventilation system. You know, and you have people's half-assimilated forms in the wall of flesh, guarding important things.
So what's the story of this game?
It's very much kind of kept to the imagination. It's not very explicit.
Oh, okay.
You are a being that's essentially been born into this world with not knowing your purpose. What people have kind of figured out is that the bigger lore of the game is that this world has been abandoned. It's no longer functioning as intended.
Yeah.
And you are basically one of the sort of heavily genetically modified servitors that was meant to be a part of this society. And the dysfunction has made it basically reclaimed in a sense by the heavily genetically engineered nature. Many of the systems are showing age to the point that they don't function correctly. There's all sorts of terminals full of, like, ammunition, and you can genetically, like, plug in your gun in order to do things. Like, move walls around.
Yeah.
And you can tell they don't seem freshly maintained.
Yeah. Yeah, everything does have that kind of rusty, like
Yeah.
it's like decaying, but not.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's hard to just. I mean, it's
It's
obviously
decaying just as much mechanically as it is biologically.
Yeah, yeah.
As you can see, broken bits of bone there that are making up the structure of the building. And yeah, this thing has terrified the shit out of me when I was in high school. Like, you can see he's just not choosing. He's just choosing to just not deal with it.
Right.
And you can see there's consequences to those actions later.
Oh.
Also, your hand, like there's also evidence that like you are definitely some kind of credentialed being, like, at least biologically. Yep, unique kill animations.
That's so crazy.
Because you can actually insert your hand into some of these terminals, and they open up for you. So clearly, you are meant to be someone who was meant to access these systems, but
Right.
you are essentially scorned both by your birthing mechanism, which is a horrible way to look at, the mother.
Right.
But also the fact that you've essentially been scorned by everything. It'd be
Jesus.
nature. And see, that's getting resources out of one of these terminals to put in your,
God damn. Even the sounds
Yeah,
of it are just grody.
Yep. Yeah, and yes, that is coming out of your stomach.
Oh, wild, dude.
You seem to have on your left hand this sort of it's some kind of dangle that gives you access to areas. And there's also this sort of infection that's going on, this sort of plague. It seems to be why the systems are decaying, and it's affecting you. With every boss battle, it claims more of you, and you basically die at the end.
Oh, crazy. Dang.
It, with a distinct emphasis on lacking purpose, lacking understanding of who you are, and never really interacting with anyone or anything.
Which is very
you're born. Yep, you're born and you die, no purpose.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, we're at our hour.
Indeed.
And God damn, that's fascinating. So it just highlights how deep his influence was into the world of pop culture and of horror and everything else. And so again, that's why I wanted to cover him. And thank you 3 for joining us for this. It's been great to have you.
Glad to hear that.
It's definitely been a pleasure. And I guess it's time to wrap up.
Yeah. So with that, next week we'll be talking about Robert Venosa, who created a very different kind of world, diametrically opposed to H.R. Geiger's in a lot of ways. But he actually introduced H.R. Geiger to Salvador Dali. So tune in next week for that. Same bat time, same bat channel. And yeah.
Go out and look at some art, damn it.
That's right. So we'll see you next time, folks.
See ya.
Cheers.
Bye.